Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special Innovate Finance webinar on balancing work and family, achieving an equilibrium that works for you. So first of all, happy International Women's Day to everyone out there and listening in. I hope you're having a great day. I'm Janine Hirt, Chief Operating Officer at Innovate Finance, and I'm so excited to have a panel of just 4 amazing women that are going to talk a little bit today about both their professional lives and their personal lives and how we achieve that balance. So I think it's worth saying that, of course, over the past few years, we've seen some really amazing progress for women in the workplace, but we also know that there is still lots more that we have to do. And we know that women have, in particular, been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The Women in Work Index is estimated to fall in 2021 down to 2017 levels. This is the first year-on-year decrease that we've seen in 9 years. We also know that progress towards gender equality needs to be twice its current rate to recover from the pandemic by 2030. And given the progress made over the past 9 years, PwC estimates that it will take 112 years to close the gender pay gap if we continue on as we are doing. 112 years, sit with that numbers. That means it's not only going to affect our children, but our grandchildren and future generations as well. However, let's focus today on some positives because there are a lot of positives to celebrate as well. According to Lloyds Bank Consumer Digital Index in 2020, both males and females are now equally likely to have essential digital skills for work in 2020. In 2020, we saw 36.2% of board members on the FTSE 100 be female, up from 26% in 2016. And according to our own investment landscape research, the amount of money going to female-founded or female-led fintechs grew from 11% in 2019 to 17% in 2020 in the UK as a total percentage of all money invested into UK fintech. We also have seen that female-led fintechs tend to be much more resistant to COVID-19 and the pandemic than their male-led counterparties. 78% of female-founded fintechs had more than 18 months cash reserves, and only approximately 50% of male-founded fintechs had less than 18 months of cash reserves. So lots more to be done, but great progress that we're seeing. And today, as I mentioned, we've got 4 incredible women here to talk about one of the key factors actually in ensuring we have great female leadership in the workplace and finding that very elusive balance between work, professional life, and home and family. So I'm delighted to have with me Felicia Meyerowitz, founder and CEO of AkoniHub, Rosemary Stone, Chief Corporate Officer at Swift, Annette Evans, Head of People FinTech at Global Processing Services, and Sophie Guibaud, Head Growth Officer at OpenPayd. So we have an hour, and I would love for each of you just very briefly to introduce yourself, both on a professional level, tell us a bit about your career and background, but also your personal life, so the audience understands where you're coming from as well. Why don't I start across my map? How about we start, Rosemary, with you?
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Janine. So I'm Rosemary Stone. I'm the Chief Corporate Officer at Swift. Swift, as you may know, provides the underlying infrastructure for the global financial system. I'm based in Brussels, and I cover the global HR function and also the global communications function, as well as support for the CEO office as part of Swift's executive team. I'm British by background. I'm the mother of 3 daughters. I have 2 daughters of 16 and 14, so heading well into the teenage years. And I also have 1 younger daughter of 11. So definitely hands full on the home life front as well as on the work front. So really happy to be participating in the panel today and sharing all the perspectives on making that work.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. Felicia.
Hi there. Yes, sorry, I lost you for a second. Can you hear me okay? I'm Felicia Meyerowitz, and I'm the CEO and co-founder at Akoni. So a little bit of background on me is I have a young daughter, only one, 7 years old. And obviously that I juggle together with Akoni. My partner, my husband, is based between the UK and India. So I do a lot of single parenting as a result of that, and he lives quite a hectic life. So I've learned to adapt. I am South African originally, and I come from a community, I'm Jewish, where women don't typically start their own businesses. They're very professional. So originally I'm a chartered accountant and I worked at PwC. So I'm not an entrepreneur that started in my 20s. I have been working in financial services for probably almost 27 years now. And I love outdoors. I love anything active. And I believe very strongly in incorporating movement and the joy of activity in just daily, anything daily, you know, whether that's going to school or I bought a bike now. When the office is open, I'll cycle in and all of that. And for me, yeah, lockdown has been a struggle in some ways, but very beautiful in other ways, because I got to spend time with my daughter, which I didn't before. Because I used to be in the city or at events till very late, you know, 10, 11 o'clock at night, 2-3 days a week. So I feel that I've been very blessed in that sense. And I'm sure we'll come to a lot of questions later, so let me not go on too much.
Thanks so much, Felicia, for joining us. Thanks. Annette.
Hello, thanks for having me, Janine. So I'm Annette Evans. I'm the head of people at Global Processing Services, a payments processor. I have 2 boys, so 2 rampant boys, you know, continually fighting behind me, as some may hear in some of my Teams or Zoom meetings. So one is 11 and the other is 6. So I think for me, similar to Felicia, lockdown has actually been a blessing in disguise. Being a career mum, if that's what we want to call ourselves, career mums, it's very difficult to be able to juggle the two. You know, I found it quite difficult before lockdown, having to, you know, balance the parents' evenings and turning up at the school versus, you know, being present for meetings at work. So it's been a real blessing, and it's also enabled me to spend more time with the kids, understand them a little bit better, and it'll be really good, Janine, for us to just talk about maybe how also the children have changed, having the parents or the females more present during the time that we spent with them. So really excited for this discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Annette. And Sophie.
Yeah, so thank you for having me here, and glad to be in such great companies. I'm Sophie Guibaud. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of OpenPayd, which is basically a company that provides payments and banking to corporates, all API based, and we provide banking and FX and card processing and all that kind of thing. Before that, basically, I spent the last 10 years in FinTech. So I think I have been at the beginning of the new wave of FinTech. Actually, I have seen the birth of Innovate Finance out of level 39. And before that, I had a career in finance, like, so more the boring, what I would call the boring part. Sorry for the people that are from there, but yes. And in between, I launched a company called HelloFresh in the UK. So that was like the break from finance, but I actually like lasted barely 1 year, and I went back to finance just after. Personally speaking, so I'm the mom of 2 beautiful baby daughters of 2.5 years and of actually 11 months. I work normally with a London company from London, 3 days a week, while I live in Bordeaux in France. So it means that I commute a lot. It means also 2 days a week when it's not COVID time, I'm not with my daughters. But I'm very, very lucky to have like a very supportive husband. I know it's International Women's Day, but I want to celebrate the ally here, because without him, nothing would be possible. So yeah, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. So I think you've already all touched on a couple of key pieces that we want to delve into a little bit more in the next hour that we have. Just a reminder for anyone listening in, please do send your questions through on the chat. We will try and take 10 minutes out at the end to address some of those. And we really want to make this a very interactive session, so please do send them through. Now, we talked a little bit already about the impact that COVID has, and I want to go back to that slightly later on in the discussion, but I'm quite keen to hear from each of you. If you look back on your professional lives, maybe tell us a little bit about the time in your career or in your life where you potentially felt it was the most difficult for you to balance work and home life. And were there any key learnings that you've taken from that? And Sophie, let's start with you.
So me, I think it was actually the period before becoming a mother. It was the period of, or like the fight to become one. And essentially the fertility issues that we went through with my husband. So it lasted probably a couple of years. And at this point, I didn't feel so open to talk about it publicly. I mean, for plenty different reasons, which means that everything I was doing was kind of the background. While traveling across Europe, and it has definitely been the hardest time of my life, which means that essentially, like, my key learning here has been that I should have probably been more open about it. Sometimes you can and sometimes you cannot, but let's say that I would have preferred to create opportunities to be more open about it, because the truth is that the second time when OpenPayd approached me, they made me the offer for the contract, and I took the phone to call my CEO and I said, look, I'm really keen to join, but I might be pregnant next week. Like, is that, I mean, I know it's not politically correct to do that, but I wanted, before taking a big challenge, I actually wanted to have the buy-in of the company I'm joining. And she was like, of course, like, we want you on board 6 months away, whatever you want to do, it's fine, it's you what we want, etc. But it was so relieving, because would that it work the week after or not the week after, I knew I was with a company that really wanted to support me doing that.
Sophie, that's really interesting, because I think a lot of times we talk about the balance after we have children in the picture and as they grow, but actually there's quite, for a lot of women, we know that women tend to having children later on. And so that it's not maybe always the easiest step, and there's challenges that come in advance of that, and balancing that and also your mental health around that as well can be a real challenge and a struggle. Felicia, what about you? What was maybe the most difficult thing that you faced?
Yeah. So for me, it was definitely when I had my daughter. And because two things happened, I lived in India for a few years, where my husband is from, and then came back when we had my daughter. And then unfortunately, I got a job straight away, which was like as a chief operating officer. I was responsible for like 23 global countries. And obviously my husband wasn't here most of the time. And I will be honest, I had no concept of what being a mother was. So I prior to that, I used to work all the time. I mean, because I enjoy work, no one made me do it. And I just had no idea how much time you needed to take having a child, and how much your sleep would be impacted. And, you know, things like travel, you know, just getting on a plane and, you know, going to visit all our subsidiary companies and things like that. It took a massive toll on my health during a 6-month period. And I would say that it even took me those 6 months to realize that I didn't know how, I didn't understand fully. I wasn't prepared for what it meant. It was partly coming back from a new country, partly starting a job much quicker than I thought I would have to. You know, because the opportunity came, so I just took it, and I thought, oh, I'll set up my business. I also thought I would set up my business on the side. By the way, that was how out of kilter with reality I was. And since then, it's really for me, like when I look back on that period, and I'm like, oh, if I'd just known, you know, and either, you know, no one wanted to tell me, or maybe people told me and I didn't listen. I don't know. And if I just known, I would have just organized my life very differently to give myself, you know, just a bit of peace during that period of time. So now I've learned a lot, and I have a much greater understanding of myself. Like, you know, motherhood it changed parts of me. You know, I got much more into things like mindful meditation and general, like I follow a very specific style of parenting, which is sometimes called mindful parenting, to be cheesy, respectful parenting. So, and that was partly for me. So, and that was from that period of my life, I spent a lot of time reading to find something that resonated well and could help me deal with things.
We're going to dig into the mindful parenting in a few minutes, Felicia. So that sounds very good. Annette, what about you? What has been the more difficult side?
I would say the actual parenting bit has been quite easy for me. But I had probably the worst pregnancies. Well, the 2 pregnancies that I've had, they were terrible. So I had something called hyperemesis, which is severe sickness in pregnancy. It lasts from probably week 5 or 6 until you give birth. And literally the moment you give birth, all the symptoms go. But it's like we're talking about 20 to 30 times a day vomiting. So I was off work for just my whole pregnancy, basically. Don't ask me why I had another one, knowing that would happen again. The worst mistake of my life. But the best outcome, which is my son, obviously. So yeah, for me, that was the most difficult bit, because it was life-changing in a sense that I think sometimes we don't think about parenting as the start of the whole process, which is the pregnancy bit, and going through that and understanding that, oh, I've still got to go to work today and I'm tired and I've just, thrown up in the morning. That is very difficult to deal with, and turn up at work and act like everything's okay when actually you feel like total crap. I didn't even get to that point. I was bedbound for the whole pregnancy. And so there's somewhere in the universe, they've given it back to me, and I've got these beautiful children that literally are a godsend to me. So I can't complain about that, but I didn't anticipate that I would have any health problems. I'm a pretty healthy person, exercise and, eat well and all the rest of it. So it was a shock to me that this came out of nowhere, and having to sort of take time out. And I think that's what we battle with as women, is the child rearing, the pregnancy, the maternity. We're taking time out of our career to do that. And for some females, they might see it like a step back. However, there are ways which, I'll probably talk about a bit later, that, you can still keep yourself and your mind going during maternity or during your pregnancy, so that, you don't necessarily need to do things that are work related. It could be stuff that you do outside of work that keep your mind fresh and going. So yeah, that was a very difficult time for me, but I'm having a ball now.
So then it comes around in the circle. Good. Rosemary.
Yeah, I think from my side, it was maybe a little bit more on the practical challenge, actually, because I was living in Belgium when I had my kids, with family based in the UK. So I didn't have that immediate support network around me. And obviously, when I first went over, it was like for professional reasons. So all your network is kind of work related. And so that was quite tough in the beginning. And the friends that I had around me in Maid who were also having kids at a similar time, we really became each other's support networks. But I think a few years in, you sort of feel the pull in both directions. To be honest, you feel the career pull and the commitment that you need to make to that, but also the pull of the time that you need to spend at home, exactly as Felicia said. And also it depends on how things are set up. So in Belgium, for example, the kids, they all have Wednesday afternoon off school, which for me was like a childcare nightmare in the beginning. And, my kids were needing to go and stay at friends, and we were relying on goodwill left, right and centre. And in my previous employer, I asked, can I have Wednesday afternoons off in order, to solve this problem? And I was told by my female superiors at the time, don't ask that question, because that's not what we do. If you need to go, if you have an emergency, do it under the radar. But essentially the message was be invisible, not actually, you can ask that legitimately as a question. it was like, this is a choice, either you work for the company or you take a freelance career route. That was the only way you could kind of get flexibility into a career. So I think those were really, really tough, and they actually, you know, has an impact on my choice to stay in that environment. And I think maybe looking back, I realized that there are different cultures out there. There are different kind of environments you can work in. And actually you have to sort of set your own tolerance for what you want as well in terms of that, because not being in a supportive environment can be really, really tough to work through.
And Rosemary, I want to come back to this question about creating the environment, but I'm curious, for those of you right now, do you feel you have found that balance, or at least a working balance?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yes, I would say. I mean, in a sense, I've taken on more seniority as I've gone, so the job gets more intense in that sense. But I'm fortunate to work and lead in a company that has great policies around flexibility. And for me, it's less now. When the kids were younger, you really needed the time at specific moments. But for me, it's much less about whether I'm, you know, can be working from home 1 day or 2 days or whatever, but much more it's a message the company sends you, which is, I trust you to do your job, and I know you'll do it, and you'll manage your family. And with that, you'll take the time if you need it, and you'll prioritize things the right way for you and for the company. And I think where I sit now, that's more important. I still do, in non-COVID times, go in the office a lot because I like it, and there's, you know, good reason to, and I want to do team working and many other reasons as well. But to know that there is that flexibility there, I think is a massive asset for people working at all levels in the company.
So what do you think, and this is really for all of you, but what do you think that both the female and the employee can do, but also the organization as well? I mean, I have to say, I've been very lucky. We have a phenomenal leadership and management here at Innovate Finance, and our CEO, Charlotte Quaswell, and prior to that as well. I have a 2.5-year-old. I had some miscarriages before having my beautiful daughter now as well. And so I've seen that. I'm actually in awe of you that have older children or multiples. I bow down to you very much. But what do you think that an employee can do, both what's their responsibility, but also how can we develop this type of a culture that is really supporting women in the workplace? And maybe there's something we can learn. We talked about this last week. Maybe there's something we can learn between fintechs and the corporates, and how do we draw those across?
I would say definitely for employees, I think Rosemary touched on it. You have to be transparent about your situation. I think it's so important. We like to take on this role as females as, you know, super women, and, you know, we're juggling a million things at the same time, and no, it's fine, I don't need any help, I'm just doing great. And actually what that does is it blinds your employer, so your manager, your organization, from actually the realities of what it's like to be a female and, you know, holding all of these different plates. So I always tell employees at GPS, you know, tell me what the issue is. You know, if you're having an issue with, for example, making it for an 8:30 meeting because you do the school drop-off, be transparent about that. No one's going to kill you for it. But if there's, for example, continuous lateness and you're not really given the real reason why that's happening, your employer is just going to act upon what they can actually see. So the likelihood is the more transparent you are, the more an employer is able to, you know, find some solutions to some of the barriers that you're facing. Now, those solutions are by no means permanent solutions. A good employer is able to sort of switch and change and say, actually, let's review that after 6 weeks, or let's do it for 6 months. Let's see how it goes. If it doesn't work, or you're feeling that you want to change things, we can. But I would say the key thing is be transparent. Flexibility will only be given if you make it clear that you need it. Now, we know as women, we will do the hours regardless. Now, I'm a key fan of, I know people use the term flexible working. I call it smart working. I can work smarter. You know, the moment my kids are asleep, I can get, an hour's worth of work done in sort of 5-10 minutes. The moment they're out there behind me and I can hear stuff going on, I will be slightly distracted. So smart working is the way to go. And, some employers don't necessarily understand the term flexible working. So, use your HR departments, use other people that you can see as comparators within your organization who are, high, good performers, to show that it can be done.
And it's so true, and I think that's why we push for so many women in the leadership positions as well, because they understand it. I am interested to see what happens with COVID, because obviously now for the first time we're seeing people almost not just as employees but individuals. We see into their homes, we see their children, we see their parents, their husbands, their wives, etc. So does anyone else have any thoughts on structure in terms of the environment in the workplace?
Yeah, I actually wanted to just build up a little bit on what Annette has been saying, because actually an ally dropped some thoughts in my head at that point, and is the reason why I've been so open with OpenPayd about wanting to have a second kid, essentially. So my point is that essentially, like, you need to give a chance to your employee to do things right, to your employer to do things right. And if they don't do things right, then it's just not the place for you. So of course, like, it's not taking into consideration maybe enough the people that are in difficult situations, that need to cling on to their jobs and things like that. But for the others, I believe that it's very important to give the chance to the employer to understand. And if they don't understand, that's just not the place you want to keep on giving, because like, it needs to kind of be both ways, right?
That's a great point, Sophie. Good. Felicia or Rosemary?
With the COVID situation as well, we see that parenting is a challenge for both genders, actually, and especially in this work from home situation, it's requiring everybody to work differently. And back to some of the points that were made at the beginning about the upsides of it, I think if I take my own case, it's forced me to be stricter on myself about the boundaries between work time and family time, because otherwise everything just merges into one and it can get quite overwhelming. And maybe the other thing is, we can't necessarily just take the office way of working and just plant it onto a work from home, or at least not in my case, or else I'm on back-to-back meetings, literally the whole day long on using technology. And it's actually a very draining kind of way of working. So you also have to time block differently in order to work differently and to keep your productivity going. And I think these are kind of learnings that both men and women are having to take into account as they're kind of load sharing as well through the pandemic period.
Felicia, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was only just going to add, like, in our management team, we luckily also have 4 women. I should say, yay. And so it's something, for me, what's key is the flexibility. So because each person has got their own particular needs, normally depending on the age of your child. So, our CFO returned from maternity leave and she's doing a 4-day a week. So we worked out how to make that work. Then during lockdown, obviously, there were times when we couldn't manage, we are actually a payments firm and we're classified as key workers. So there were some advantages to being able to send your child, but for my kids' school, it didn't work out. So working out, okay, well, actually, when are the particular times? Is there going to be like a half an hour where actually I might need to pay some attention? But coming to what you were saying, Rosemary, understanding my boundaries, I knew there are times I absolutely cannot be interrupted. Otherwise, I have to start like 3 hours of concentration again. And so I had to get a nanny, to help for mornings, so actually, and I was like, well, that's better than me going insane. So some people managed without that. And it was impossible for me because my kid was on a very strict routine. So every person in our organization had completely different needs during this time. And I think it was, or is still, about listening and trying to be as flexible as possible. Obviously, this doesn't only apply to women. It applies to men, and it's not only for parenting. It could just be this kind of situation generally, where we're facing something so different.
That's a great point, Felicia. And I think, Rosemary, you brought up something really interesting in terms of blocking out your time and actually identifying the time that you need to spend, be the personal. Are there any tips that you have to try and block that out? And also, what do you try and find time for on a personal basis to recharge? And this is for all of you again as well, but Rosemary.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to start that off, I mean, I think for me, the thing that I need to pay attention to more than anything is the mental overload that can come from, you know, the zillion to-do lists at home and plus all the work commitments, etc. So for me, I do try to get up earlier in the morning before my kids. I do try to have a bit of quiet time to start the day, to sort of plan what I'm going to do, and also take a bit of reflective time, you know, and space, mental space at the beginning of the day. I do try to focus on exercise as well, whether it's just getting out for a quick 30-minute walk or, you know, doing an online fitness or something like that. I do find it benefits definitely to sort of look after yourself a little bit physically as well. And I try very hard with my PA to limit the amount of meeting time to a reasonable time so that I can also handle all the emails, the, you know, work that I need to do for the executive team and obviously upwards to the board as well, so that, you know, there is enough time, because if the entire working day is full of meetings internally, then the evenings are the catch-up time for the rest. And I think sort of having a bit of lower tech at night as well helps me a lot, you know, switching my phone off and actually reading a physical old-fashioned book is something that I quite like to do. You know, but I'm conscious of the amount of time we spend on technology, maybe more than I was before the pandemic started, and also just to be aware of that always on feeling that it can create when you're working that way.
It's really true. Annette, what about you? Anything?
Yeah, I would sort of say the exercise piece, I think, for a lot of people is very important. But I'm going to be a bit fickle also. Just a little bit of retail therapy, you know, buy yourself something nice. I'm a keen believer of, you know, do a little bit of retail therapy. It might be just to go and get a nice piece of cake that you know just makes you feel a little bit happy. And I think it's important to do the little things. It doesn't have to be something massive, but we don't give ourselves enough of a pat on the back and a thank you from me to me is really important to do, because, you know, parenting is a job within itself. And there are a lot of people that, you know, have chosen to be stay-at-home mothers, and they understand that that's a full-time job. So that plus your full-time job, and I know for a lot of us, we've got kids, but we've got the husbands too. That's another full-time job. So a little bit of retail therapy, and just, you know, saying thank you to yourself by, you know, giving back to yourself always does, for me, puts a smile on my face. I know a couple of weeks ago I bought, I don't know what you call them, the sort of massage, the foot massages where you know, you put your feet in, you put a little bit of hot water, some crystals, some bubbles. It's little things like that, you know, they don't cost a bomb, but it really puts you in a different zone from work, so that when you do go back into the beginning of your week, you do feel rested.
Love that. Candles as well.
Candles.
Oh, yeah. Candles. Sophie, any thoughts on specific tips from you?
Yeah, so me, I actually I've blocked slots where I do repeated stuff, but at least the slots are blocked. So basically the morning I start with my 10 minutes meditation just to calm down, because I'm very, my brain is going everywhere. So meditation is really good. It works for me at least. I commit to have every morning breakfast with my girls before they go to nursery. So it's really important for me to have that happening. When they are in nursery, I do 45-minute sports, and then I start my day. So essentially I start around 8:45, 9, but I'm lucky because I work with England. So it's like if I was starting at 8, you know, so it's good. But having this block time, and then it's when my girls come back from nursery around 15, make sure that I am available for them, spending time eating with them until 7:30 essentially. And those slots make me happy. And when life is too much, so I'm not into retail therapy, but I'm into spa therapy, as Annette has alluded to. So it's just when I'm just tired, need to clear my head, I just give the girls to my husband, and I'm just booking my massage on Saturdays or something.
Very nice. Very good. And Felicia, now tell us a little bit about the outdoors engagements, but also this mindful parenting. I think would be good.
Right. Well, so this comes back to, when my kid was small and I had to try and understand a little bit more about myself, because I'm not quite feisty. And when I was younger, I had a temper. So I knew that I had to get it under control. Otherwise, my poor kid would suffer. So I read a lot about different styles. And there's this one style which comes out of Europe. It's called RIE. And it's called respectful parenting. Some people think it's like amusing. So from your child's birth, you speak to your child. Like, I'm going to take you to the room to change your nappy now, that kind of thing. So some people think it's a joke. I totally appreciate that, but different things work for different people. And so I followed it quite a lot. Not, I'm not religious about it, but it really helped me, because that's really how I, want to engage with my child. And the most important thing is the amount of tools there are for parents to handle your emotions right exactly when you need it. Because, everyone says, oh, balance your life, eat, sleep well, do this, do that, and you'll be fine, whether it's parenting or business. And I'm like, but in the moment, when you are faced with something which is high conflict, or a child, whatever it is, that you also need tools in that exact moment, unless you are a brilliantly controlled person. So, and I just feel anyone can be triggered. So I had to learn a lot about myself, things which maybe I sort of knew, but didn't really realize how I could be triggered quite easily. And I had to sort of really work very hard, I would say. And I continue to work hard being a good parent. It's not for me something which I'd be like, oh, I'm so maternal. I was like, day one, I was cool. Everything I did, like, I researched it, and then I worked, I wouldn't say in my family I've got all shining examples of parenting style. So I really had to learn a lot, and I really enjoyed it. And so for me, I feel like through my daughter, I have this unbelievably beautiful view of the world. Like, she'll often say to myself, or her godmother, and everyone feels this way about their kids, right? So I'm not, she'll say, well, why do you love me so much? And I'm like, well, you illuminate everything. And for me, it's just, what a privilege. Because I could easily have just, never had a child. And carried on with work, and also there would be nothing wrong with that either, so that's the first thing, is learning those tools from very early on, and learning what triggered me, and understanding myself, what I needed to change. And for me, parenting has been much more about myself than it has been about my daughter. And that doesn't sound normal to other people, but for me, that process, like, I would say my daughter's like the most easygoing kid, so I'm like, thank God. But yeah, so and that's been an amazing. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is, I only started doing yoga when I was pregnant, and only because I wanted to learn yoga breathing, because I kidded myself I'd need no painkillers, and then I had an emergency C-section. So ridiculous, all these plans we make. Anyway, I had Annette, the opposite of you. Like, I had a crisis, like, from the minute I was when I went into labor. So my pregnancy was great, and I thought, hey, everything's fine. And I was like postpartum pre-eclampsia. So anyway, so I continued to learn a lot of tools, but so yoga's helped me, but then I started reading up a bit about meditation, and to find because there's a lot of types of meditation as well, and what types of meditation would help me, both personally and then also professionally. to stay as focused as possible. So now I try at least a few times a week. Sometimes I do it the whole week, sometimes no times. I try and do a lot of mindful meditation, you know, every morning. And also if I'm very tired and say I'm about to go into a meeting, I'll do like 5 or 10 minutes of mindful meditation. That helps me to be more present. I would like to say that I certainly am not always present, you know, with my daughter or anything else. But I am very distracted by my phone and things, but I work really hard on that. And then the other for me has been incorporating movement. So now we don't, both myself and my daughter, she started cycling like a lot during lockdown. I got this electric bike. We don't catch the train. So, you know, I live in Belsize Park. She would cycle easily like 3 to 5 miles or 6 miles into London. We'd go to Green Park or whatever, cycle back, and for anything now we used to catch the tube or the bus like one stop to her school, and now we walk, like if it's 30-40 minutes, you know, or cycle. Everything we did during lockdown, we did an hour's walk in our local heath. Again, we're lucky where we live, which is spectacular. So just to try and like breathe and in a way that outdoors makes me feel much more present as well. It sort of forces it, because you can't really, if you're like walking up a hill out of breath, you can't be looking at your phone answering your emails, or I can't. So things like that have helped me a lot, and I really want to try and take as much as I can post lockdown, you know, of some of those lessons that I've learned that have helped me personally during this time.
I love that, Felicia. And I just have to say, I mean, what I find consistently phenomenal about women is actually how many hardships we've endured that you wouldn't even really be aware about an individual. And then you delve into their background and their history and what they've experienced. And I would love to talk a little bit now about the support system, because we don't work like an island, as they say, or so we are always looking to either our family members, our immediate family members, or our bigger family members, or colleagues, or friends. And maybe, Annette, start with you, because I know you shared, when we were discussing before this call, you shared a difficult period that you went through and who you turned to during that. So maybe just start with you.
Yeah, yes, no, I'd love to share that. So yeah, other than the difficult pregnancy, my youngest son, who's now 6, when he was born, all was well for the first, I'd say, sort of 2 or 3 months. And then we started seeing that he has some difficulties breathing. So we were taken to A&E, both myself and my husband. You know, they'd give him some steroids. It sort of opens up his airways, and all was fine. But it got progressively worse. And so there was a time where we were going, I think, A&E probably 6 times a week. There's probably one day that we would have had off. So, and I'm still working. I've gone back to work at this point, and so it became really, really difficult. And then we had to make a decision for him to go through quite a detailed surgery that would basically involve him having a transplant of his trachea, which was a sort of touch and go situation. So it's either, you know, he's really going to struggle in life with breathing, or we go and we have this transplant. And for me, it was probably the most difficult decision of my life. But, you know, we were under Great Ormond Street, and they said, listen, we've done it quite a few times before, and, you know, the success rate is really high. So we decided to go ahead and get this surgery done. So being back at work, I'd had, if you think about it, you know, I was in A&E at least 6 times a week. I'd had so much time off of work. I think they thought, you know, what's going on? Is Annette really telling the truth? Is it really as bad as it seems? And, you know, thank God the employer that I was with at that time was really, really understanding. So then my son went in to have this major surgery and was in intensive care for about 3 months. And that was the hardest time of my entire life. I just remember, because I was still going to work. So I'm thinking back now how I made that work. And I think when you talk about the support structure, I had my husband. But when you do look around, and I know all of us have some family somewhere or another, but we have the sole responsibility of what happens with our children. So although we look at family members to jump in now and again, they can only do it now and again. They also have their lives to live. So Great Ormond Street was, let's say, a 20-minute walk from my workplace. So I'd go to work, and then during my lunch break, I would go to Great Ormond Street. I would spend my whole lunch break there, talking to the doctors, making sure my son was okay. And then I'd go back to work, and I would do that every day consistently for 3 months. And I was living on Great Ormond Street. Are brilliant. They have their own accommodation for parents. So I was living on their accommodation and going to work. Thank God my son's all well now. It all went well. But I think it's a prime example of some of the things that none of us anticipate that happens with our children. Mine's probably a bit of a deeper scenario than many, but we have kids who, fall sick, or they've had a real bump at school, and you've just got to throw everything down. You're about to go into a board meeting, and I think all of us have had it. You see your phone ring and it's the school and you go into a bit of panic mode, and schools are really good at saying nothing to worry about, mum, it's just that. But you do go into that panic mode. And so I think, following that, what I have been able to do is reflect. And I think we all need to do that now and again, reflect on some of the times that it's not been as easy, what the support structure was, and where you gain your superpowers. So I talk about this a lot with a lot of women. Somehow we have this superpower that we just keep on going. And although people will say to you, how do you do it? I would have broken down. We just don't have time for that. We just don't have time for that. We just continue. But it's good to reflect, go back and think about, as I said, the individuals in your life that have really helped you. And I'm a keen believer of going back and talking to people and saying, thank you. Thank you for that little bit of support that you gave me at that time. It really made a difference.
Amazing, Annette. Thank you for sharing that as well. Rosemary, what are your thoughts? Because I know in Brussels, you're away from your family, and we touched on this earlier. How do you sort of find that environment of support?
Yeah, I think it's, some of it comes through shared experience, I think, actually, of people that you meet who are in a similar situation. I mean, one of the nice things about Brussels is it is a very international environment. So you're not alone in the sense that, there's quite a lot of people living here who don't have family close by, which can actually build some good networks. But I think it's also why what the employer does has an even bigger impact in terms of your feeling of ability to cope, because it's in these small moments, the moments where everything feels like it's on a bit of a knife edge of falling apart, or you don't know if you're going to pick the kids up or someone's sick or whatever. These are when you need that support the most. So I think, again, it's not necessarily any different, and Annette's right, even if you have grandparents on your doorstep, they have their own lives to lead as well, and your kids are your responsibility. But I think there is a kind of a need to open out, to ask for help when you think you need it, to voice your concerns towards your employer if you feel like you're struggling at a particular moment. Because I think as well, this continuity is important in the workplace, the not giving up, if you need a break, have a break, but then come back, rather than feel like the whole thing has to stop. It's a much more important long-term outcome for you and for your family if you can keep going in that sense. So I think draw on the support where you can find it, and don't be ashamed of doing it, because many people face the same situation.
That's great. Thanks, Rosemary. So let's delve a bit into how we can create this type of supportive work environment. And one of the questions has come in from the audience, and it's specifically, if you're in the startup space, how do you craft organizations with this ethos of flexibility from the start? And keen to hear from you, Sophie, and also you, Felicia, about how you've tried to do that. And I think just to Annette's point, we as female leaders have a responsibility to create it, but also men have a lot of the similar struggles. It's not just women facing this challenge about work-life balance, men are facing it as well. So how can we just create an environment that's better working for everyone as well?
So I actually would like to touch upon two examples. So first of all, my example of going into maternity leave. So what I have done actually is that I have created a playbook of how I wanted it to be kind of before, what was the plan during, and how I wanted it to be after. And I actually presented it to my boss so that we actually can have this discussion and we can know exactly basically how things would be going. So like the second maternity leave, for example, I wanted to be much more involved, to be still in the exco meetings, etc. So we agreed essentially on having like monthly catch up, and plus for me to join the excos and to know the daily life of the company. But it is what was working for me. It might not be what other wants, right? But it was great to, like, for both of us to actually know how it would be, instead of like having like my boss that didn't want to annoy me during my maternity leave, while actually I wanted to be in the know, not to arrive back and everything has changed, and it has changed in a way I didn't want it to be changed, like on my functions and things like that. So it was really useful. Now looking at like specifically the question that was asked in the Q&A, and how the company can actually support that in the early stages, I would say it's really so like the maternity plan and helping managers, or paternity or parental plan, helping managers having those discussions is really important. So to make it normal in the workplace to discuss about parenthood, whatever you are in the journey, and not only moms, but can be father, it can be plenty different ways. And secondly, I was thinking, seeing this question, that what can be interesting would be also to put that in the company, like a guide of conduct or whatever, like the company playbook, essentially things around the fact that during your journey to parenthood, it's okay to take time off for the appointment with doctors. It's okay to need maybe extra time or on short notice because you are going through fertility issues, all that kind of thing, just to normalize the discussion. Because when you read a book and you say, oh, my company has thought about, well, that people that are adopting, people that are having fertility issues, and it's just so it's like a normal discussion rather than making a big deal out of it. So I think it's not about like putting massive structure in place. It's about showing that the company is human, made of humans, essentially.
Great, Sophie. Thank you so much. That's really helpful, actually. And Felicia, your experience in growing and building a company ground up.
Yeah, so from my side, I think the first point is really around diversity generally, which for me, it's a difficult thing, like in our space. Even, though I try really hard relating to female and minority applicants, it's a real struggle. And I remember even when we were getting maternity cover, we received, say, 40 applications, and the only one we received that was a woman, only one, and this was for a CFO maternity cover, which many women do. The only one was through my network. So it was really and lucky that was the one who landed best of job. But it was for me a real surprise, and we did everything. We put it through, there's those change your words to make sure that women are, don't not apply, and we did as much as we could in that respect. But it was, we went through our own networks and our own advertising. We didn't use recruiters. So the first thing for me is finding a way there with recruitment, so your pipeline of people coming on board, because if you don't have that anyway, you're going to struggle with whatever ideas you want to implement. And then the other thing is, which is a little bit harder, is managing people according to, the work that they do, the outcome, rather than, 9 to 5 working. So if someone needs to be taking a break in the middle of the day to fetch their children or whatever the case may be, whether, like in your example, Sophie, you don't say anything and you just go do it and you do your work in the evening, or whether you need to tell people because you're expected at meetings, whatever it is, that open communication, but allowing people to just be a grown-up about the way they work. And then the other point for me is around, especially people who have families, particularly women, is not expecting that they're not ambitious. That just because their hours might be slightly more constrained, is so allowing people to be able to flourish and be supported with whatever that ambition may be, if that's applicable. Obviously some people aren't ambitious, which is also fine. And then the last point for me is obviously always acknowledging and incorporating, I suppose, the men. Is that, because this is not for me a male-female issue, whatever it is we face, it's a societal issue. And I think there are many women who face, multiple barriers from other women. So that it's not, and that for me translates to societal issue. So that makes it quite a complex issue to actually solve. And I think quite complex in the sense that it needs policy intervention. That's how strongly I feel about it now. And that in turn will mean over time, things will change.
Right, for sure. And it is interesting to look at the international approaches as well. We have 4 minutes left. I have 2 questions actually for all of you. The first one is, do you think we as women can have it all? Anyone can go first. How about?
I don't think anyone can have it all. I don't believe in that concept. I think I'm not even sure I believe in a fully balanced concept. I think I like the idea of striving for it, but I think particularly when you are ambitious and you want to be accomplished or accomplish, you've got objectives and goals in life, there's always going to be something that's slightly out of balance because of the passion or the drive that continuously pulls you in certain directions. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested what others say.
Yeah, I kind of, when I was thinking about this, I mean, there's a bit of a stereotype, I think, that lies behind the question that you can, be the old style alpha male leader and, the most nurturing mother making organic baby food or whatever. There is a little bit of this underlying the question, but I think to answer it, it should be more about being in alignment with your own goals, with your own ambitions, and we should be in a position where we enable women to do that. And we break down the barriers that may be in the way to doing that. And I think that's the most important thing, that people have different paths to follow, different ambition levels, different appetites in terms of the way they want to raise their children. And these are all valid routes. But to say, no, you can't pursue that, that's where, the discrimination comes in, and that we need to tackle.
Thanks, Rosemary. Annette and Sophie, any thoughts?
I'm sort of on the fence with it. So, it depends what your perception of having it all is. For some people, having it all is just raising a family, and for them, they've made it. Whereas others, it's career plus, opening their own business, etc. I think what we just need to think about is everyone has different motivations as to what having it all is. As long as an employer, we maintain agility around our processes, our what we offer for our staff, because I always talk to our senior leadership team about, although we have agile as a methodology in the business, that should also be incorporated into our culture. So I'm not too keen sometimes on, making everything a policy. So an example is, our flexible working or our smart working in the organization. I want that to be as agile as possible. therefore it's down to the managers to really be that local voice to their teams about how they manage their teams and, you know, what flexibility that they want to give. But in terms of can you have it all, give it a go. There's only one life, right? Give it a go. If it doesn't work, it's fine. You know, failure is better than not having given it a go.
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, I kind of agree with Rosemary and Annette and Felicia. I believe, like, on the fact that essentially, like, having it all is so different for so many different people, because we realize ourselves differently according to our personal goals. I just would like to add that it's also about taking all the external help we can. So it's having it all is just not being a single woman, like, super strong and because that can bring you to the breaking point. So it's just really about, like, finding your allies, whoever they are around you, and just leveraging on it, and then you find your right balance, essentially.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we are out of time. I actually had many more questions I wanted to ask from all of you, but maybe we'll all do a follow-up. But hopefully everyone that listened in got some tips, whether you have children, whether you don't have children, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, wherever you are, hopefully you took some great inspiration here from the amazing 4 leaders that joined us today. So just thank you very much, Felicia, Annette, Sophie, and Rosemary. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their International Women's Day. Take care. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.